Speaking of franchises, I wrote a piece today about the Oklahoma City Thunder and why they should not even hesitate to bring James Harden back into the fold for as many years as possible. You actually wrote about this back when you were in Sports Illustrated. We can both agree that there is no way they trade him this month. I just can't see Presti doing that. I also don't think they'd risk this year's title run by trading him before the February deadline. It just seems like too dramatic of a move. How long do you see them going forward with their big three plus Ibaka?
I mean, I think the most likely outcome is as you say, that that they hang on to him sort of as long as possible, right? I mean, trading him now, trading him before the deadline, sort of amounts to shooting yourself in the foot before you really have to.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, what makes the situation so fascinating is that it's not like this team needs to take another step, really. I mean, they're a controversial call from almost being up 2-0 in the finals. I mean, they're a championship team right now, and there's really no way to trade him during the season without taking at least a small step back. I mean, you could argue that they could find someone who's like maybe an ace long-range shooter that doesn't quite have his ball handling, that might be able to help the team almost as much as Harden because of all the ball handling that's already there. But they're so close that it would be unprecedented, I think, for a team that's really right there. And I mean, this is why you have a team, to be right there, to have a chance to win a title. So I think the safe money is still to hang on to him. They give him the max, either now or in free agency, and then just sort of see what the economics look like, see how real these alleged sort of financial issues are going to be for them. As you point out, the reality of those losses is hard to see from our vantage point. And also, just like, if Perkins is terrible again this year, they're just going to get rid of him. And of course, they still have to pay that money, but they don't have to pay the tax penalties that would come with it. And I think that's a much sort of, if you have that in the bag, there's no reason to act rashly now.
Right. And on top of it, I'm sure a lot of this is posturing, and they're trying maybe to get him to settle for 4 years, $55 million, something like that. So they'd save $9 million over the course of the deal, with like $2 million a year, something like that. But with the tax, that ends up being $4 or $5 million. And I get it, but I just think after what happened with Rondo in Boston, I just can't imagine any of these next wave of these potential free agent guys going for it. I mean, even look at what happened with Eric Gordon last year. New Orleans was trying to get him for, I think, 4 years, 50, something like that, and he was like, no, screw you. He ends up with 64. Harden's getting his 64, and there would be multiple teams ready to give it to him. I can't understand why he would take less than that, and I'm sure if you talk to Rondo, I think we know what Rondo would tell him, right? Rondo would say, you should hold out for the backs.
You got to get yours, yeah. I mean, there's no question, as you wrote today, and I know from talking to people. I mean, you don't even have to talk to people. You just have to look at the teams that are going to get cap room, and look how few shooting guards there are in the league, and that are top notch. And he's getting the max.
We're going to have you on tomorrow to talk about the James Harden podcast, but because we have no idea to how long this power thing is going to go and what the damage is going to be, we're going to jump the gun. James Harden. Stunningly traded on Saturday night. Kind of came out of nowhere in some degrees, but on the other hand, on Friday, it did, for the first time, there seemed to be some inklings that this might be headed this way. How surprised were you?
I mean, I was surprised in that, it was Saturday night, and I certainly wasn't planning on thinking hard about the NBA at Saturday at midnight, and I just sort of,
right.
And I just sort of assumed that teams will take sort of, in general, with an asset of this level, that you take sort of the safest route possible. And we talked about how this is like borderline unprecedented for a team that is a real title contender to take a step back like this. And so it's surprising in that regard. But, I was surprised for the last month or two how many people around the league, not Thunder people, but how many people around the league would sort of warn me, like, I think there's a better than zero chance that they do this soon. Not a great chance, but it's like not off the table.
Yeah.
So I wasn't shocked. The timing surprised me, but and again, I'm surprised, but I'm not like blown away surprised.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. One of the things that I thought was really unfair was, and this happens on Twitter, and this is one of the problems on Twitter, is that people are trying to write in 140 characters, and they kind of jump to conclusions, stuff like that. James Harden did not demand a trade. James Harden was traded, right? James Harden was negotiating with Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City offered him one price. Harden and his agent wanted another price. And then Oklahoma City just said, all right, fine, we're trading you. So I think for people to say, oh, here's James Harden, oh, he got greedy. I don't think he got greedy. He's worth what he's worth, and he's got to be one of the top 20 players in the league right now. He deserves to be paid at least in that vicinity. And, in my opinion, 4 years, $53 million would have been a bargain for him. What did you think?
This is actually sort of the least interesting part of this for me, is this this idea that either side is being unethical somehow. Yeah. I mean, both of them made business decisions. They're allowed to make those business decisions. And,
Agreed.
The interesting thing to me is, why is 4 and 54 or 4 and 53 not a financial deal breaker, but 4 and 60 is? I mean, obviously the luxury tax compounds that, $6 million difference by 3 or 4 times probably. And that does make a significant difference, but it would have been not equally, but I mean, the Thunder are still looking at payrolls in the $90 to $95 million range when you factor in the tax, and whatever they do, they still have to pay Perkins' salary. They're still looking at payrolls that are that high, or payroll bills anyway, that are that high if they keep Harden at $54 million over 4 years and amnesty Perkins or whatever. I mean, that's still way $20 million over the luxury tax that gets worse after this season. So it's interesting to me that was not a deal breaker, but a few $1 million higher was. But yeah, I mean, James Harden can do whatever he wants. I mean, it's not for us to judge what he would do, and I wonder how many people who are making that judgment would turn down significantly more money to stay at their current job out of loyalty.
Well, here's the two other points piling on your point. One, from what I understand, Harden and his agent wanted a trade kicker. So, all right, we'll take a little less, but if for some reason we're in a situation like what Rajon Rondo was in last year, where he took a discount with Boston and then they tried to use that discount as a trade asset for Chris Paul, they were protected. And if Oklahoma City didn't want to put that trade kicker in there, that's kind of on them. I think Harden is justified saying, all right, I'll take a little less, but if you trade me, I should be able to make some up on the back end. The other thing is, I think Presti actually made a tactical error. Reading the papers today, it's pretty clear that he was almost a little too upfront with Harden. He was like, if you don't take this, we're going to trade you to Houston. So now if I'm Harden and I'm talking about this with my agent, and I'm thinking, all right, if I go to Houston hasn't used their 5-year max on anybody yet. So now I'm looking at, instead of 4 years, $53 million, I could get 5 years, $78 million from Houston. Yeah, that sounds better. That's $25 million more. Like, of course he's going to want to go to Houston at that point. Did you feel like Presti made a mistake telling him that?
I don't know. I mean, I sort of give him credit for his honesty and sort of being upfront with what the financial limitations were and all of that. And, I haven't heard that about the trade kicker like you have. But again, as I said, that's a business decision. If they didn't want to do that, that's on them. I mean, that's part of how you negotiate. And yeah, the 5th year is sort of the CBA story, the collective bargaining agreement story, isn't necessarily the luxury tax or woe is me for the small market teams. It's just those little rules, like that they already used their 5-year extension on Russell Westbrook, so they don't have it left in the tank for Harden, and that hurts in that regard and sort of inflates the difference between what the Thunder could offer and what the Rockets can offer now. But I mean, those are all business choices. You make them, you pay the price.
And I think Harden, in his mind, had sacrificed a lot already. He's coming off the bench, even though, he's an Olympian. He's one of the best 20 players in the league, and definitely one of the best under 25 players in the league. So he sacrificed that. He sacrificed minutes. He sacrificed shots. Now he's on a team where he can't even get the 5-year whatever, because Durant and Westbrook have already claimed those 5-year spots on just about any other team in the league. He gets that 5-year. So I think at that point, if I'm Harden, I'm thinking, well, I've already given up all this other stuff. Can I at least get the 4 years 60? Like, can you at least show me that you respect me in that degree? And I think what's interesting is it's pretty clear that Oklahoma City didn't feel like he was a 4 year, $60 million guy. I mean, there definitely did seem like there was a little bit of a Bill Belichick type, here's your value, I'm not going $1 over that value, and if you don't agree, I'm trading you. In your opinion, was he a 4 year, $60 million guy?
Well, I mean, I think I do think that the Thunder had that question, and a lot of people around the league have that question. There's a huge division of opinion about whether he is, and I think it's not just, I talked about why did they draw that line in the sand? Why is it just that few $1 million that is the do or die line? And I think it's actually not just that; it's the few $1 million and the sort of lingering uncertainty that he's really a number one option. Look, he's a max player because the market will pay him a max contract, and I think that he will. It's sort of like, is it really relevant? Like, he's going to be a very, very good player, one of the top 15 to 20 guys in the league. Is he going to be as good without Durant and Westbrook around to take up some attention? I don't know, but he's going to be so good that if he doesn't live up to a $15, $16 million contract, he'll live up to a $13, $14 million contract. And once you start sort of arguing about those values, you're missing the forest for the trees.
And Bob Bulgaris is coming on later. He made a good point on Twitter that I totally agreed with. Like, it doesn't matter if Harden is quote unquote a max player or not. It matters what he would get on the market, and 12 teams in a heartbeat would pay him the max to have James Harden in their team. And if you're going to judge it by what's somebody quote unquote worth, then LeBron James should be worth $60 million a year. Like, you can't just say, well, what's that guy worth? Because worth is all relative. And I think if you were the Lakers and you could have LeBron James and pay him $60 million a year, you probably would. So, I just think the bottom line is they had 3 of the best 20 players in the league, and now they're rolling the dice with their title chances this year with Kevin Martin and Jeremy Lamb, which Jeremy Lamb a rookie. Kevin Martin, has he even played in a playoff game? I'm trying to remember. Has he played in a playoff game?
I believe, yes. He was on some of the Kings teams that were at the tail end of like the Kings' relevancy. So I don't think he played a huge number of minutes, but
talk about the basketball implications of dropping from all the stuff that James Harden did for Oklahoma City, and he did so much subtle stuff for them, especially like anytime Westbrook was in a little bit of an offensive funk, or just those moments when Oklahoma City, their offense just wasn't working. All of a sudden Harden could just get to the rim whenever he wanted. Now you have Kevin Martin, who likes coming off screens. How do you feel like this Oklahoma City offense is going to work now?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this trade is that Harden is so damn good, but he also comes off the bench. And he comes off the bench because his skills are sort of slightly redundant with the other 2 guys. And so they need him to carry these second units that otherwise wouldn't be able to score any points. And they made but ideally you want all of them on the court at once, and the Thunder were like off the charts offensively when they had all those guys on the court. But they were still sort of learning how to use each other, and there would be times when Harden would just sort of float around on the perimeter while Westbrook and Durant were doing their thing, and it wasn't ideal. So, it's a really interesting thought exercise because, you could see Sam Presti thinking, is there a middle ground here that I can take where, because of our unique situation with these other 2 great perimeter players, we lose another great perimeter player but don't drop off all that much? And by that I mean, in a big game now, it's going to be really hard for him to have any time at all when both Westbrook and Durant are on the bench. I think he's probably going to need to stagger their minutes because Kevin Martin cannot carry an offense as a primary ball handler nearly at all. I mean, he's not in James Harden's world in that degree, and so you can't just sort of hand Kevin Martin the keys to the second unit offense. I don't even think with Eric Maynor back you can do that. So he's going to have to stagger his minutes differently and stagger his rotations differently. But, if Maynor's healthy and ready to go, if Perry Jones is healthy and ready to contribute, I think that's workable. But, clearly there are going to be times where Westbrook is in a funk or Durant is being guarded by LeBron or Andre Iguodala or whatever, that not having that third guy is going to hurt. And there's no question they've gone from sort of favorite / co-favorite whatever to sort of on the fringes behind the Heat and then the Lakers, and we go from there.
And you mentioned the redundancy. Now, I would flip that around. I would say I thought that was what made that team special, was the fact that there was never really a drop-off for them offensively. You know, there was never a point of a game where they didn't have somebody at the floor who could get at least a decent shot when he wanted to. And now it just puts so much pressure. To me, the pressure is now on Westbrook. And what kind of player he is going to be, what he is, which we're still trying to figure out what he is. He's not totally a point guard. I'm more of a fan than most, I think. I wrote a column about the 90% theory. I think 90% of the stuff that he brings to the table is fantastic, and you just have to learn how to live with the other 10%. But now, when he's in those little funks, when he's in one of those games where he's 6 for 21, and that's when Harden would come in and they could kind of run the offense through Harden. They're not going to be able to do that anymore, and I just think they're worse. It's not rocket science saying that, but I was getting emails from my friends who root for the Lakers. The fact that they were delighted by this trade is a bad sign for Oklahoma City. The Laker fans were terrified of James Harden, right? And now he's just off the team.
Yeah, they're worse. What's interesting about them is that their three sort of holdover stars now, if you count Ibaka, are so young that they're all going to get better in those sort of little ways that are hard to notice. So if 90% of what Westbrook did last year was good, is 94% of it good this year? And does that 4% begin to chip away at what you lose with Harden? But yeah, I mean, they're going to be worse, and they have to get better defensively, Harden aside, and we have to see them prove that. But there's no question that they're worse, and that the other guys have more pressure on them. And it's interesting to think about, right? Because if you start ranking players, Durant is either the second or third best guy in the league, and Russell Westbrook is going to fall somewhere between probably 8 and 12. If you've got two of the top 12 players in the league and one is number 2 or number 3, you should still be able to be pretty damn good every single season and contend for a title, right?
Yes. And that's kind of why I wanted to see them give this team one more chance. We didn't even talk about Presti explained why he didn't go this route, and I just disagree with the conclusion he came to. And he's a better GM than I'll ever be, and I think he's smarter about basketball than I'll ever be. I just disagree in this specific case. He was saying that he didn't want to roll it over until next summer, because what they could have done is just, all right, fine, James, we're not going to agree to an extension. Let's agree to continue this next summer. And then made a run with this year's team. And had they done that, all of a sudden now they have James Harden at this phenomenal price, right? He's making $5 million a year. He's like the 20th best player in the league. He couldn't be more of a bargain. And that's a real asset to have for this specific season. So you make one run at the title, then you figure it out next summer. Now, Presti said he didn't want to do that. He didn't want it hanging over the team. He felt like they wouldn't be able to get as much in a trade because it was worth more to Houston to try to trade for him now because they could give him 5 years. I still would rather take the crack at going for the title when you think about how close they were last year. What would you have done?
I probably would have gone for the title, only because you just don't get these chances. I mean, this is a once in a decade, once every 2 decades chance. I mean, the line of being contender is so thin, and it's so easy to fall below that line that I think you got to take your chances when you get there. Especially since, as you say, they would have been in control of the situation over the summer, and this isn't a case where there could be poison pill offers that would complicate things, because a max contract is a max contract. The inconveniences are minor, at worst, and the trade market is still going to be there. I mean, Harden's not going to lose trade value unless he has a horrible season, and that's not going to happen. And the sort of, centerpiece player that they would want in this kind of trade, they get a year to look at Brad Beal, or they get a year to look at Valanciunas, or they get a year to look at these other guys who they wanted and couldn't get. I don't think so. But that's the kind of thing that's hard to judge from the outside, right? Presti knows the vibe of that locker room. He knows what his coach is telling him. He knows sort of internally what is best for the team, and you got to sort of concede that he knows better on this one. But yeah, in an ideal world, I'm taking another run.
I talked to Daryl Morey, the Houston GM, on Saturday night, and he said something that I thought was interesting. I hope I'm not betraying his confidence. I was just asking him, like, why do you think Oklahoma City didn't just play this out. I mean, you would have made this same trade in some form next summer. And he said, I think Sam just really liked the deal, which made me think, maybe we're not seeing something with Jeremy Lamb? Maybe they think maybe they just love Jeremy Lamb and think he's like the perfect guy to put on that team. I have to confess, I didn't see him that much in college. When he went 12th, I felt like that was about the right spot for him. What are you hearing about Jeremy Lamb?
I didn't see him that much in college either, so I'm not the best guy to, give my opinion on a guy that we've seen in summer league, basically from the NBA standpoint. But people are mixed on him. There are people who think he's going to be a very nice player, not a star, but a very nice second or third banana offensively with great athleticism and good skill and a good stroke. And there are people who are not sold on him as a starter on a good team, and that's sort of the typical. I mean, for that pick range, that's typical. You don't necessarily get a starter at that range of the draft. And so, I don't think Jeremy Lamb, Sam may have liked the deal, Presti may have liked the deal, but he liked it because he thought it was the best he could get and not because he thought it was a great deal. I think he had higher ambitions, and this was where it ended up.
Yeah, see, I feel like they could have gotten a comparable deal next summer and tried to win this year's title before they did it. Hey, for instance, people have been speculating about who might have been on the table other than this Houston trade. And I'm sure from Houston's perspective, they're trying to make the best trade they can make because they're worried somebody might trump them. The guy I kept looking at was Klay Thompson on Golden State, because that's somebody that I feel like could have really helped Oklahoma City this year, and then maybe they're not quite as good as Harden, but he gives them a little bit something a little bit different than what Harden does, but maybe not necessarily worse. And I feel like he's getting better. And then if you're Golden State, you get Harden. He's a franchise guy. Your fans know who that is. They seem like a team that's, they're always kind of worried about what the public perception is. Harden plays into that. Oh, here we go. Here's a famous guy. I really wonder if that trade was ever on the table, and if it was, who said no? Who says no to that trade?
Well, they looked at Klay Thompson. I know that. I don't know how serious it got, but I mean, they're not stupid. They asked about Klay Thompson, and they tried to work a deal, at least in a preliminary stage for him, because he's absolutely the perfect guy to get in this kind of trade. He's only in his second year, so you've got him cheap for 3 more years. He's one of the best shooters in the world already, and Oklahoma City sort of quietly has a spacing problem when Harden is not on the floor, because Westbrook's not a great three-point shooter, and Cephalosha you don't have to guard, and they're big guys. Ibaka's a good shooter, but the other guys have no range at all. Well, Collison now and then, but you get the point. And I think Thompson would have been perfect, but the problem is the Warriors have no expiring contracts of any size to sort of make the cap workable in a way that at this moment, or even a year from now, would work financially for the Thunder. They took on all these guys, Richard Jefferson, and they didn't amnesty Biedrins, and they have all these contracts that are big money through 2014. And so you would have had to either send Curry along, who's going to be an expensive guy anyway, a year from now, and they don't necessarily want to give him up, or find a third team, and then it just gets very complicated. Golden State would have been, I think, a much better contender for Harden had their contracts been a little bit different, but Thompson still would have worked just straight up, I think, or you can find the flotsam to make it work, and I don't know who said no to that, but certainly they thought about it.
Thompson would have worked, I think, pretty close to straight up with Harden, just because of I think they might have had to throw in one more guy. But it's interesting. Now we're going deep dive NBA nerddom, but they made that Steven Jackson Richard Jefferson swap last year and took on an extra year of Richard Jefferson's contract. Steven Jackson's expiring this year. Had they not made that trade, that would have been your expiring contract, and that was a trade nobody liked when they did it. But the other one that I think nobody mentioned, but I'm surprised Minnesota didn't get involved with Harden. Maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't have it. But I had always wondered about a Harden and Ibaka for Kevin Love type monster deal. Like, who would say no to that? But I guess with Kevin Love's broken hand, maybe that wasn't on the table. But I'm surprised Minnesota didn't, because they had Derek Williams. They have some other pieces. Maybe they were involved too.
I I haven't heard them, and Ibaka can't be traded. I don't think till December 15th or. There's
because
some trade,
you're right.
there's
right.
some trade, but that's temporary. But Minnesota is, I haven't heard them, and I think they view Kevin Love as probably borderline untouchable, even though they only locked him up for 3 years.
Would you have kept Harden or Ibaka if you could only pick one?
That's the interesting meta story here, is that they've made a bet that 2 wings and a big guy is better than 3 wings and whatever big guys you can get for cheap money, and it's sort of NBA conventional wisdom to bet that way, right? I mean, that you need a really good big guy defensively and someone who's going to develop hopefully more into an offensive threat to just diversify things a little bit. Sort of question one is Westbrook or Harden, and I actually do think Westbrook is a better player now and will continue to be a better player. And so if that decision is made, then I would, gun to my head, probably take Ibaka, although I think that he is overrated. I just think his athleticism is so stunning and his potential is so huge to be a difference maker on defense that given Westbrook and Durant already being there, that I would take Ibaka, knowing I'm not taking the guy who's actually better now.
I would have kept all 4 and just tried it out.
You didn't give me that choice.
I'm just saying, I would have kept all 4. I mean, I have it on very good authority from a couple different people that Oklahoma City, the 2 figures I've heard are either 30 million or 35 million for what they made profit last year, right? I'm not even saying, I mean, we're talking a shortened season and they made that much money. Now it would have been less this year because now they're paying Ibaka, their salaries went up, stuff like that. But this is a team that over the last 4 years probably made close to $100 million. And now, because they were faced with the potential of maybe not being in the black for 1 year, it really does seem to me like they panicked. And as we talked about earlier, and we talked about this in the podcast a couple weeks ago, it's just never happened before where a team has chosen the financial bottom line over titles. I mean, there was the Joe Johnson Phoenix situations, the closest we've come, but Joe Johnson left. He signed with Atlanta. Like, Phoenix was offering him contracts. He just didn't want to stay. This is a totally different situation. Let's talk Houston really quickly. I think they're a playoff team now. Do you agree?
No.
No.
No. Do you want me to explain?
Yes.
First, the West is loaded, and I will concede that with the injuries to Love, Dirk, and whatever the hell is going on with Bogut, that there is going to be an opening at the back. Not necessarily an open spot, but there's more of an opportunity for someone to sort of sneak in to the conversation for both the 7th and 8th seeds. And Houston, look, I'm a huge Ashiq guy. I think he's going to play up to that contract and be a huge difference maker. I like Lynn, Harden, great. Here's my thought on why they're not a playoff team. A, they're just going to play too many young guys who have no NBA experience or very little, including Lynn. And when you start piling up so many of those guys in your rotation, it's just hard to win. And the second thing is, although Harden makes them better now, they dealt from one position, from a position that they already had filled with a decent NBA player and filled it with a better NBA player. They didn't sort of fill a void anywhere on the roster. I mean, I like that team, and I like Chandler Parsons a lot. He may have the best contract in the entire NBA, by the way. Yeah. But I just think they're going to be playing too many inexperienced guys. They'll be good. They could push 35, 38 wins, but I think it's a stretch to see them in the playoffs.
Here's my case. I think that 8 seed is wide open because Dallas, I think, falls off. Minnesota, I think, falls off because of the Kevin Love injury. I actually had Portland penciled into that 8 spot just because I thought it was going to be somebody weird. It's probably going to take 39, 40 wins to get that 8 spot. And when you look at what Houston has, assuming Jeremy Lin's knee is healthy, and we have not, nobody really feels that good about Jeremy Lin's knee. It just doesn't seem that comfortable. But if he can rally back a little bit, now you have 2 guys who can get to the rim, and then on top of it you have Ashiq, who House and I called Asich on our podcast last week for an hour. Ashiq, who really looks like he's coming into his own as a rebounding blocks guy. It's not a bad foundation. Terrence Jones looked really good in the preseason. So, and then you have Parsons. Like, they have pieces. So I don't know. I also think Harden's gonna have a little FU going this year. I really think he's going to. I think if we're talking fantasy sleepers, he's got to be at the top of the list for me, and Ashik as well. All right, so if Houston doesn't make the playoffs, then who do you have going in that spot?
It's a tough call. Right now, I would say Minnesota, just because I think they have a really great coach. Love will be back fairly early in the season, so that if they can just sort of scrape to a 500 record without him, that they'll be in good shape. And I just think they're a deep team with a lot more interesting pieces now, and no guys anymore who just like take everything off the table when they come into the game. That would be, and I might say Golden State if I knew that Andrew Bogut and Curry were both ready to go, but I would place those two above Houston and Dallas right now. I think Dallas is in serious trouble.
I agree. And also Dallas is a candidate that if it goes south coming out of the gate, they'll just do the 1997 Spurs. I think they're smart enough to do that. They'll gut it and try to use this as the 1 year to get a top 3 pick and rebuild a little bit. We didn't even talk about the Lakers. Big winners from the weekend, the Lakers. That's a team that was so young and athletic and frightening and scary and just rolled through them in the playoffs and really should have won all 5 games in that series. And now you just remove Harden from it completely. They have to be considered the favorite now. I mean, I can't even imagine picking Oklahoma City in a series against them now unless somebody was hurt. What do you think?
You could have just replaced. You could have said every single thing you just said about the Lakers, except 6 games instead of 5 games, and replaced Lakers with Spurs.
Oh yeah, good point.
They're the 2 winners, and in terms of stability, they're sort of polar opposites. We know exactly what the Spurs are, and it's just a question of can they stay healthy, and will the improvements from their young guys outweigh the declines from their old guys. The Lakers are a wild card because they're already not healthy, although I think Kobe's basically fine. And we don't know about their bench at all. And we got to see these guys mesh. But, even they've got the highest ceiling of any team outside Miami, and maybe a higher ceiling than Miami. So if you want to call them the favorites and the big winners of the weekend, it's hard to argue that. But I think I don't want to say that everyone forgets the Spurs because Spurs fans whine about that all the time, and it's not actually true. But I do think people are starting to forget the Spurs a little bit.